David Martinez pulled his old Honda into the driveway of his small rental house, the engine making that familiar wheezing sound that reminded him he needed repairs he couldn't afford. Snow had started falling an hour ago, dusting the neighborhood in a thin white blanket that made everything look cleaner than it actually was. Christmas Eve had arrived with all its expectations and pressures, and David felt the familiar knot in his stomach tighten. He sat in the car for a moment, watching the warm yellow light spill from his living room window. Inside, his 8-year-old daughter Emma was probably arranging and rearranging the few presents under their modest Christmas tree for the 100th time. She had been so excited all week, despite David's gentle warnings that Santa might not bring everything on her list this year. The truth was, Santa was broke, and David had scraped together just enough money for a used bicycle he'd found at a garage sale and a few small gifts. The past 3 years since Sarah's death had been a constant struggle. David worked 2 jobs, days at the auto repair shop and evenings cleaning office buildings, but it never seemed to be enough. The medical bills from Sarah's long battle with cancer had eaten through their savings, their insurance, and, finally, their home. Now they lived paycheck to paycheck in this rental house on the edge of town, where the paint peeled and the heating system had a mind of its own. David grabbed the grocery bags from the back seat, wincing at how light they felt. He'd managed to buy ingredients for Christmas dinner, but it would be simple: a small chicken instead of turkey, instant mashed potatoes, and canned green beans. Emma wouldn't complain, she never did. That kid had more grace and understanding than most adults David knew, which sometimes made him feel even worse about what he couldn't provide for her. As he walked toward the house, movement in his peripheral vision caught his attention. Across the street, behind the old abandoned gas station that had been closed for years, he saw a small figure hunched over the dumpster. The streetlight was dim, but he could make out what appeared to be a child, maybe 10 or 11 years old, carefully going through the garbage. David stopped walking. His first instinct was to mind his own business. This neighborhood had taught him that getting involved in other people's situations could lead to complications he couldn't handle. But something about the careful, methodical way the child was searching through the trash made him pause. This wasn't random mischief or vandalism. This looked like desperation. The child was wearing what appeared to be a thin jacket, completely inadequate for the December weather. No hat, no gloves. David could see small puffs of breath in the cold air as the figure continued searching. Every few seconds, the child would glance around nervously, clearly aware that this activity wasn't something that should be witnessed. Emma's voice called out from inside the house. "Daddy! You're home! Come see what I made!" Her excitement was infectious even through the walls, and David felt his heart squeeze with love for his little girl. She had such joy, such hope, despite everything they'd been through. He needed to get inside to her, to continue the Christmas Eve traditions they'd managed to maintain even in their reduced circumstances. But he couldn't shake the image of that small figure in the cold, searching through garbage on Christmas Eve. As a father, something deep in his gut rebelled against walking away from a child who might be in trouble. David had been raised by a single mother who taught him that you help when you can, even when you don't have much to give. He set the grocery bags on his front porch and walked across the street. The snow was falling harder now, and his footsteps were muffled by the thin layer accumulating on the asphalt. As he got closer, he could see more details. The child was definitely a girl, with long dark hair that hung around her face like a curtain. Her clothes were clean but worn, and she moved with a quiet efficiency that suggested this wasn't her first time doing this. "Hey there," David called softly when he was about 20 feet away, not wanting to startle her. The girl's head snapped up, and, for a moment, David saw her face clearly in the streetlight. She was younger than he'd thought, maybe 9 or 10, with large dark eyes that held a wariness far beyond her years. She looked like she was ready to run, her body tense like a deer caught in headlights. "It's okay," David said, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. "I just wanted to make sure you're all right. It's pretty cold out here." The girl didn't respond immediately. She clutched something to her chest. David couldn't quite see what it was, and took a small step backward. Her eyes darted between David and the street, clearly calculating escape routes. "I'm not in trouble," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was just looking for something." David nodded, keeping his distance. "What are you looking for?" Maybe I can help. The girl's jaw tightened, and, for a moment, David saw a flash of pride that reminded him painfully of Emma. I don't need help, she said firmly. I can take care of myself. Those words hit David harder than he expected. How many times had he said the same thing over the past 3 years? How many offers of assistance had he declined because of pride, because admitting he needed help felt like admitting he was failing as a father? I'm sure you can, David said gently. But, even people who can take care of themselves sometimes accept a little kindness from others. My name's David. I live right across the street. He pointed to his house, where Emma had now turned on the porch light, probably wondering where he was. The girl followed his gesture and seemed to relax slightly when she saw the modest house with its cheerful Christmas lights. It wasn't threatening, just a normal home where normal people lived. I'm Maria, she said after a long pause. Her voice was soft but clear, and David noticed she had a slight accent he couldn't quite place. Nice to meet you, Maria. Do you live around here? Maria's expression became guarded again. Kind of, she said vaguely. My grandmother and I were staying nearby. Something in her tone suggested there was more to that story, but David didn't press. He remembered being a kid and how adult questions sometimes felt like interrogations, even when they came from good intentions. Well, Maria, I don't know what you're looking for, but I was about to make some hot chocolate for my daughter and me. You're welcome to warm up for a bit if you'd like. David gestured toward his house again. Emma's about your age. She'd probably love to meet you. Maria looked longingly at the house, and David could see her internal struggle. Part of her wanted to accept, he could see it in the way she glanced at his warm, lit windows. But another part of her, the part that had been taking care of herself, was cautious. I should get back, she said finally. My grandmother will worry. David nodded, understanding. Of course. But, Maria, if you ever need anything, and I mean anything, I'm right across the street, okay? Sometimes neighbors help neighbors. That's just how it works. Maria studied his face for a long moment, as if trying to determine whether he meant what he said. Whatever she saw there must have satisfied her, because she gave a small nod. Thank you, she said quietly. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas to you too, Maria. David watched as she walked away, disappearing into the shadows between buildings. He stood there for several minutes after she was gone, snow collecting on his shoulders, wondering about the circumstances that would put a child out searching through dumpsters on Christmas Eve. His mind raced with possibilities, none of them good. When he finally returned to his house, Emma was waiting at the window, her nose pressed against the glass. Who was that, Daddy? She asked as soon as he came through the door. Just a neighbor, David said, setting the grocery bags on the kitchen counter. A little girl named Maria. Is she new? I haven't seen her before. I think so, sweetheart. She seemed nice. Emma's eyes lit up with interest. Maybe she could come over and play sometime. I could show her my room, and we could make cookies, and we'll see, David said, though he couldn't help but smile at his daughter's immediate desire to befriend someone new. Emma had always been generous with her friendship, quick to include others and share what she had. It was one of the things that made David most proud of her. As they prepared their simple Christmas Eve dinner together, David found himself glancing out the window toward the abandoned gas station. He couldn't stop thinking about Maria, about the careful way she'd been searching through that dumpster, about the pride in her voice when she insisted she could take care of herself. That night, after Emma had gone to bed with visions of Christmas morning dancing in her head, David sat at his kitchen table with a cup of coffee, looking out at the snow that continued to fall. The neighborhood was quiet, most families probably tucked inside their warm homes, preparing for Christmas morning. But David couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere out there, a little girl named Maria might not have a warm home to go to. The thought kept him awake long into the night, staring out at the empty street and wondering what tomorrow would bring. He had no idea that his brief encounter with Maria would soon reveal a truth that would change everything he thought he knew about love, sacrifice, and what it really means to be a family. Sometimes the most profound moments in life arrive disguised as ordinary encounters with strangers. Sometimes Christmas miracles begin with a simple act of noticing someone who needs to be seen. As the clock struck midnight and Christmas Eve became Christmas Day, David finally went to bed, but sleep remained elusive. In a few hours, Emma would wake up excited for Christmas morning, and David would put on a cheerful face and celebrate with her as they always did. But part of his heart would remain concerned about a little girl he'd met for only a few minutes, a child who was searching for something in the dark on the coldest night of the year. Christmas morning arrived with the kind of bright, cold sunshine that made the snow sparkle like diamonds scattered across the neighborhood. Emma burst into David's room at exactly 6:30, as she had every Christmas morning since she could walk, her eyes shining with excitement and her hair sticking up in every direction. "Daddy! Santa came! There are presents under the tree," she announced, bouncing on his bed with the infectious joy that only children possess on Christmas morning. David smiled and pulled her into a hug, breathing in the sweet scent of her strawberry shampoo. These moments were everything to him, seeing Emma happy, watching her eyes light up with wonder and excitement. No matter how tight money was, no matter how many bills waited on his desk, Christmas morning with his daughter made everything worthwhile. They made their way to the living room, where the small tree David had bought for $15 was somehow transformed by Emma's excitement into something magical. She opened her gifts with careful reverence, exclaiming over each one as if it were exactly what she had always wanted. The used bicycle, which David had spent hours cleaning and adjusting, brought tears of joy to her eyes. "It's perfect, Daddy. It's the most beautiful bike in the whole world." David felt his chest tighten with emotion. Emma's ability to find joy in simple things, to be grateful for whatever she received, reminded him daily of why he worked so hard to be both mother and father to her. Sarah had been the same way, quick to see beauty in ordinary moments, generous with her gratitude and love. After breakfast and more present opening, David suggested they take a walk around the neighborhood so Emma could try out her new bike. The morning was crisp but not unbearably cold, and the snow had stopped falling, leaving everything covered in a pristine white blanket. Emma rode her bike in careful circles in front of their house, still getting used to the slightly larger frame, her cheeks pink with cold and happiness. David watched her, coffee mug in hand, feeling that particular combination of pride and protective worry that came with being a single parent. That's when he saw her again. Maria was walking slowly down the street, moving in the direction of the abandoned gas station. She wore the same thin jacket as the night before, and David could see she was carrying a small paper bag clutched tightly in her arms. Even from a distance, he could tell something was wrong. Her posture was different, more hunched, more defeated than it had been the night before. "Emma," David called. "Come here for a minute, sweetheart." Emma rode over, her face flushed and happy. "What is it, Daddy? Remember I told you about Maria, the little girl I met last night?" David pointed down the street. "That's her right there. She looks like she might need a friend." Emma's face immediately brightened with interest and concern. "Should we go say hi? I think that would be very nice of you." They walked down the street together, Emma pushing her bike alongside them. As they got closer, David could see that Maria looked even younger in the daylight, and much more tired. Her dark hair was tangled, and there were smudges of dirt on her clothes that hadn't been there the night before. "Hi, Maria," Emma called out cheerfully when they were close enough. "Merry Christmas." Maria looked up, startled. When she recognized David, her expression became cautious but not unfriendly. She clutched her paper bag more tightly. "Hi," she said softly, glancing between David and Emma. "This is my daughter Emma," David said. "Emma, this is Maria." "I love your bike," Maria said to Emma, and David caught a note of wistful admiration in her voice. "Thank you. Santa brought it to me this morning. Do you want to try it?" Emma offered immediately, with the generous spirit that made David's heart swell with pride. Maria's eyes widened with desire, but she shook her head. "I couldn't. It's yours. It's okay. I like sharing. My daddy says that's what friends do." David watched the interaction carefully. There was something about Maria's careful politeness, her obvious hunger for friendship combined with her reluctance to accept kindness, that tugged at his heart. She reminded him of Emma in so many ways, but there was a wariness in her eyes that his daughter had never needed to develop. "Maria," David said gently, "have you had breakfast this morning?" The question seemed to catch her off guard. She glanced down at her paper bag, then back up at David. "Yes," she said, but something in her tone suggested it might not be entirely true. "Well, we were just about to have some hot chocolate and Christmas cookies. Would you like to join us? I make pretty good hot chocolate, if I do say so myself." Maria's internal struggle was visible on her face. She clearly wanted to accept, but something was holding her back. "I should check with my grandmother first," she said finally. "Of course," David said. "Where are you staying? We could walk over with you and ask her permission." For the first time, Maria looked truly uncomfortable. She shifted from foot to foot and clutched her bag even tighter. She's not feeling well today. She's sleeping." David's parental instincts were now fully alert. Something was definitely not right here. A responsible adult wouldn't leave a child Maria's age to wander the neighborhood alone on Christmas morning, especially not in this weather and with this little preparation for the cold. "That's okay," David said carefully. "Maybe you could just stay for a few minutes to warm up, and then you can go back to check on her." Emma, oblivious to the undercurrents of the conversation, jumped in enthusiastically. "Yes. And I can show you my other Christmas presents. I got art supplies and books and this really cool puzzle with 1,000 pieces." Despite herself, Maria smiled at Emma's excitement. It was the first genuine smile David had seen from her, and it transformed her face completely. She looked like what she was, a child who wanted to play and laugh and be part of the joy that surrounded Christmas morning. "Okay," she said quietly. "Just for a few minutes." Back at the house, David watched Maria carefully as she sat at their kitchen table, warming her hands around a mug of hot chocolate. She drank it slowly, savoring each sip as if it were the most delicious thing she'd ever tasted. When Emma offered her Christmas cookies, she took only one, breaking it into small pieces and eating them deliberately, making it last. Emma chattered happily about her Christmas morning, showing Maria each of her presents and explaining their various features. Maria listened with genuine interest, asking thoughtful questions and offering appropriate admiration. She was clearly intelligent and well-spoken, which made her current circumstances even more puzzling. "What did Santa bring you for Christmas?" Emma asked innocently. The question hung in the air for a moment. Maria's face went through several expressions: surprise, pain, and then a carefully constructed smile. "Santa couldn't find where I was staying," she said finally. "But that's okay. Christmas isn't really about presents anyway." The answer was so mature, so carefully diplomatic, that David felt his heart break a little. No child should have to provide comfort to adults about why Santa didn't visit. The fact that Maria felt responsible for managing Emma's feelings about her situation spoke volumes about the kind of burdens this little girl was carrying. Emma, however, was having none of it. "That's not fair," she declared with the righteous indignation that only 8-year-olds can muster. "Santa is supposed to find everyone. Maybe he just got confused because you're staying somewhere new." "Maybe," Maria agreed softly. Emma disappeared into her room and returned with a small wrapped package. "This is for you," she announced, thrusting it toward Maria. "I was saving it in case I met someone who needed an extra Christmas present." David looked at his daughter in amazement. Emma had never mentioned saving a present for someone else. This act of spontaneous generosity was entirely her own idea, born from her immediate desire to ensure that Maria didn't leave their house empty-handed on Christmas morning. "I can't take this," Maria protested, but Emma was already pressing it into her hands. "Yes, you can. It's Christmas. Everyone should get a present on Christmas." Maria unwrapped the package with trembling fingers. Inside was a small stuffed animal, a brown teddy bear that Emma had received in her stocking. It wasn't expensive or elaborate, but the look on Maria's face suggested it might as well have been made of gold. "Thank you," she whispered, holding the bear against her chest. "I love him. His name is Coco," Emma said helpfully.
But, you can change it if you want. Coco is perfect.
They spent the next hour playing with Emma's new puzzle, the three of them working together to sort pieces and build the edges. Maria proved to be excellent at puzzles, with a patient, methodical approach that complemented Emma's more enthusiastic but scattered technique. David found himself relaxing as he watched the two girls work together, their heads bent over the colorful pieces, chatting quietly about everything and nothing. But, as the morning wore on, David noticed Maria becoming increasingly anxious. She kept glancing at the clock, and her leg bounced nervously under the table. Finally, she stood up abruptly. "I need to go check on my grandmother," she announced. "Of course," David said. "But, Maria, before you go, could I ask you something?" She nodded cautiously. "Is there anything you need? Anything at all?" "I know we don't know each other well, but sometimes neighbors can help neighbors." Maria considered this for a long moment, her arms wrapped around the teddy bear Emma had given her. When she spoke, her voice was barely audible. "Do you know where I could find some medicine? For coughing? My grandmother has been sick for a long time, and she can't stop coughing. Especially at night." David's heart sank. This explains so much: why Maria was out searching through garbage, why she was so protective and careful, why she seemed to be carrying the weight of the world on her small shoulders. "What kind of medicine does she need?" he asked gently. "I don't know the name. The doctor said it before, but I can't remember. It's for people who have trouble breathing." David thought for a moment. "Is your grandmother taking any medicine now? Do you have a bottle or anything that might help me understand what she needs?" Maria shook her head. "We ran out 3 days ago. That's why I was looking last night. Sometimes people throw away medicine bottles that still have pills in them." The full picture was beginning to come together, and David felt a mixture of admiration and heartbreak for this little girl who was trying so hard to take care of someone she loved. The idea of a child searching through garbage for medicine on Christmas Eve was almost too much to bear. "Maria," David said carefully, "where exactly are you and your grandmother staying? Maybe I could help you figure out what kind of medicine she needs." Again, Maria's expression became guarded. "We're staying somewhere safe," she said. "But, thank you for the hot chocolate and the teddy bear. I really need to go now." Before either David or Emma could respond, Maria was out the door, clutching Coco tightly and moving quickly down the street. David watched her go, his mind racing with concern and questions. Emma appeared beside him at the window. "Daddy, why does Maria seem so sad?" "I think she and her grandmother are going through a difficult time, sweetheart. Sometimes people need help but don't know how to ask for it. Can we help them?" "I don't know yet, Em. But I think we should try." As David watched Maria disappear around the corner, he made a decision. This wasn't just about being a good neighbor anymore. This was about a child who was clearly in a situation no child should have to handle alone. Whatever was going on with Maria and her grandmother, David was determined to find out the truth and offer whatever help he could provide. The rest of Christmas Day passed quietly, but David's thoughts kept returning to Maria. As evening approached and he tucked Emma into bed, he found himself looking out the window toward the abandoned gas station, wondering where exactly a little girl and her sick grandmother were spending Christmas night. He had no idea that the truth about Maria's situation was far more complex and heartbreaking than anything he had imagined, and that his decision to get involved would soon test every assumption he had about family, sacrifice, and the lengths a child would go to protect someone they loved. 6 months later, David stood in his backyard watching Emma and Maria play on the swing set he'd installed in the spring. The two girls had become inseparable, more like sisters than friends, and their laughter filled the warm summer evening with a joy that still surprised him sometimes. Elena sat in a lawn chair nearby, looking healthier than she had in years. The pneumonia that had nearly killed her that Christmas had responded well to treatment from Dr. Rodriguez, David's friend who had agreed to provide medical care quietly while they figured out the legal complications. It had taken weeks of antibiotics, rest, and proper nutrition, but Elena had recovered completely. The legal situation had been more complex than David had anticipated, but not impossible. With the help of an immigration lawyer who specialized in cases involving children, they had been able to apply for asylum for both Elena and Maria.
Elena's age and medical condition, combined with Maria's status as an orphaned minor, had created a path toward legal residency that might eventually lead to citizenship. The process was long and expensive, but David had discovered resources he didn't know existed. The local Catholic Church had a fund for immigration cases, and Emma's school had connected them with volunteer lawyers who worked with families in similar situations. Most importantly, David had been able to serve as a sponsor for their applications, providing stability and support while their cases worked their way through the system. The arrangement had started as temporary, just until Elena recovered and they could find more permanent housing. But, as weeks turned into months, it became clear that this makeshift family was working better than anyone had expected. Elena, grateful beyond words for the second chance at life, had insisted on helping around the house even while she recovered. She turned out to be an excellent cook, and her traditional Mexican dishes quickly became family favorites. More importantly, she provided something David hadn't realized he and Emma were missing: the presence of an elder, someone who could offer wisdom and perspective and unconditional love in a way that felt like having a grandmother in the house. For Maria, living with David and Emma had meant stability for the first time since her parents died. She enrolled in Emma's school, where her intelligence and eagerness to learn quickly made her a favorite among teachers. The wariness that had marked her early interactions gave way to the typical enthusiasm of a 10-year-old who felt safe and loved. But, perhaps the most surprising transformation had been in David himself. Taking care of Elena during her illness had reminded him of the months he'd spent caring for Sarah, but this time the story had a different ending. Elena got better. She grew stronger.
She became part of their daily life in a way that felt natural and right. Having Elena and Maria in the house had also given Emma something David hadn't been able to provide on his own: a sense of extended family. Elena doted on both girls equally, teaching them to cook traditional foods, telling them stories about Mexico and their family history, and providing the kind of steady, unconditional love that grandparents specialize in. The financial strain David had worried about had proven manageable. Elena's small disability payments helped with groceries, and David had been promoted to assistant manager at the auto shop, which came with better health insurance that he was able to extend to cover Elena and Maria as dependents. They lived modestly, but they lived well.
"Daddy!" Emma called from the swing set. "Come push us."
David walked over and began pushing both girls on their swings, listening to their chatter about school friends, summer plans, and the camping trip they were planning for later in the month. Maria's English had improved dramatically over the past 6 months, though she still helped translate for Elena when needed. "Maria," David said as he pushed her swing higher, "I got a call from Mrs. Peterson today."
Maria's face lit up.
Mrs. Peterson was her teacher, and Maria had been working extra hard to catch up on some of the academic gaps created by her disrupted education. "She said your reading test scores came back. You're now reading at grade level in English, and above grade level in math."
Maria beamed with pride. "Elena has been helping me practice every night.
She says education is the most important thing because it's something no one can ever take away from you."
David smiled, recognizing Elena's wisdom in that advice.
Despite her own limited formal education, Elena understood the power of learning and had made Maria's schoolwork a priority even during her own illness. As the evening grew later, they moved inside for dinner. Elena had made tamales, a process that had taken most of the afternoon and filled the house with amazing smells. They sat around the dining room table David had bought specifically to accommodate their larger family, sharing food and conversation in the mixture of English and Spanish that had become natural in their household. After dinner, while the girls worked on a puzzle and Elena watched her favorite telenovela, David stepped outside to make a phone call. The immigration lawyer had promised to call with an update on their asylum cases, and David had been anxiously waiting for news. "David, I have good news," the lawyer said when he answered.
"Elena's case has been approved.
She'll receive her documentation within the next few weeks, which means she can start working legally and will have a clear path to permanent residency." David felt a wave of relief wash over him.
Elena's legal status had been the biggest source of stress for their family, hanging over them like a constant threat. What about Maria? David asked.
Maria's case is more complicated because she's a minor, but the good news is that Elena's approval makes it much more likely that Maria will be approved too.
There's also another option we should discuss.
David listened as the lawyer explained that because Maria had been living with David as a guardian for 6 months, and because her legal status was still pending, there might be an opportunity for David to formally adopt her if Elena consented and if Maria wanted that. It would provide her with immediate citizenship and would guarantee that she could stay in the country regardless of what happens with the asylum case, the lawyer explained.
But it's a big decision that would affect all of you permanently.
After hanging up, David sat on his front porch for a while, thinking about how much his life had changed since that Christmas Eve when he'd first seen Maria searching through garbage behind the abandoned gas station. What had started as a simple act of neighborly concern had evolved into something he could never have imagined.
When he went back inside, Elena was tucking both girls into Emma's room.
They had been sharing the room since Maria arrived, and, despite David's offers to convert his home office into a separate bedroom for Maria, both girls insisted they preferred sharing. They stayed up late whispering and giggling, planning adventures and sharing secrets the way sisters do. "Elena," David said quietly, joining her in the hallway after she'd turned off the girls' light.
"Can we talk?"
They sat at the kitchen table, and David shared the conversation he'd had with the lawyer. Elena listened carefully, her expression serious and thoughtful. "They want to know if I would be interested in adopting Maria," David finished. "If you agreed, and if Maria wanted that. It would make her a citizen immediately, and it would mean she could never be sent away." Elena was quiet for a long moment, her hands folded in her lap. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft but firm. "David, when I brought Maria across the border, I thought I was saving her life. But I didn't know how to give her the life she deserved. You have given her something I couldn't: a father who loves her, a sister who adores her, a stable home where she feels safe and valued." David started to protest, but Elena held up her hand. "I will always be her grandmother, and she will always know where she comes from. But if you want to be her father legally, the way you already are in your heart and hers, then yes. I think that would be the best thing for Maria." The conversation with Maria herself happened a few days later. David had been nervous about bringing it up, worried that she might feel like he was trying to replace her real father or take her away from Elena. But when he sat down with her to explain the adoption option, her reaction surprised him. "Would I still be able to call you Daddy?" she asked. David's throat tightened with emotion. Somewhere over the past 6 months, Maria had started calling him Daddy, just like Emma did. It had happened naturally, without fanfare or discussion, but every time she said it, David felt his heart swell with love for this brave, intelligent little girl who had become his daughter in every way that mattered. "Of course," he said. "If you want to. And I would still live here with you and Emma and Abuela? Forever," David promised. "And I would be Emma's real sister, not just her friend who lives in the same house?" "You're already her real sister," David said gently. "This would just make it official." Maria thought about this for a moment, then nodded decisively. "Yes, I want that. I want to be your daughter for real." The adoption process took several more months, but, on a warm day in early autumn, David stood in a courthouse with Elena, Emma, and Maria as a judge made their family legal and permanent. Emma had insisted on wearing her best dress for the occasion, and she clutched a bouquet of flowers they'd picked from Elena's garden that morning. When the judge pronounced Maria legally David's daughter, Emma cheered so loudly that everyone in the courtroom laughed. Maria threw her arms around David's neck and whispered, "Thank you for finding me, Daddy." That evening, they celebrated with a family dinner at Elena's favorite restaurant. As David looked around the table at his daughters, both his daughters now, and at Elena, who had become the mother figure he'd never expected to have again, he marveled at how completely his understanding of family had been transformed. A year earlier, family had meant just him and Emma, two people trying their best to honor the memory of the wife and mother they'd lost. Now family meant 4 people from 2 different countries, speaking 2 languages, connected not by blood but by choice, circumstance, and love. Maria had started calling herself Maria Martinez, proud to share David's surname. Elena had moved into the converted garage apartment David had built, giving her independence while keeping her close to the granddaughter she'd risked everything to save and the son-in-law she'd gained along the way. Emma had adapted to her expanded family with the flexibility that children possess, delighting in having a sister and a grandmother and a house full of the kind of warmth and laughter that had been missing since Sarah's death. And David had learned that love multiplies rather than divides, that opening your home to people in need doesn't diminish what you have to give but somehow makes everything richer and more meaningful. On quiet evenings, when the girls were doing homework at the kitchen table and Elena was teaching them to embroider, David sometimes thought about that Christmas Eve when he'd almost walked past a little girl searching through garbage. He wondered what would have happened if he'd minded his own business, if he'd decided that other people's problems weren't his responsibility. But then, Maria would laugh at something Emma said, or Elena would hum while she cooked dinner, and David would remember that the best decisions in life are often the ones that seem risky in the moment but turn out to be exactly what everyone involved needed. Sometimes family finds you in the most unexpected ways. Sometimes a stranger searching through garbage on Christmas Eve turns out to be the missing piece that makes everything else make sense. And sometimes the most profound act of love is simply deciding to see someone who needs to be seen, and then refusing to walk away. David Martinez had thought he was helping a child in need, but it turned out that Maria and Elena had rescued him just as much as he'd rescued them. Together, they had created something beautiful and lasting, a family built on choice, sustained by love, and strengthened by the understanding that the bonds that matter most are the ones we forge with our hearts rather than inherit with our blood.